Well, good morning and welcome. I'm just going to open my camera up for a bit so you can see it's actually me. I will close it down once we get started on the presentation. And I'm working today with Candice Schultz, our training coordinator here in DY. And yes, we're in the office. We're all still working from home at the moment, although we're going to be gradually coming back to the office over the next 2-3 weeks. And while we're waiting for a few more people to arrive, Candy's going to put up a poll. And if you could select what your disk style is, if you have taken an Everything Disk profile, just click on which one of those is your home base in Everything Disk, and we'll just see what sort of range of styles we've got in the group today. We've still got a lot of people who are due to join us, so the numbers will increase as we go. We see we've got 10 people have selected something so far. Come on, let's get a few more. It's a bit of a head-and-head race between DIID and S at the moment. Just a couple more minutes for that. Well, not a couple of minutes, a few more seconds, and then we can get started. Okay, let's share the results. And as you can see there, there were 5 out of, I think it was 17 people chose DIID and 5 chose S. So they were the 2 most common styles in the group. So thanks for sharing that. We've got quite a blend. And so what that means is, as the facilitator of this webinar, I need to make sure that I'm covering the needs of all styles. We don't have any pure C styles, but we got some CD or DC and SCCS styles in the group. So I'm sure with some of the others that are joining us as we speak, there will be more of an even split on those 2 styles as well. Okay, so let's get started. The agenda for today is we're going to start off by looking at conflict and the drag that conflict has on today's workplace. What's the impact it's having? And we're also going to be talking about how does conflict look when we're not working together in the same office, when people are working more remotely. And we're going to talk about conflict resolution, because conflict resolution has been around for a long, long time. And now we're talking about, let's talk about productive conflict rather than conflict resolution, and what is the difference. So we're then going to go through an overview of the Everything Disk productive conflict learning experience. So there's an assessment, and we'll be having a look at what's in that assessment. We're also going to be looking at what's in the facilitator kit, which is where the learning experience comes in. I've got a short video to show you too, which is a success story. The United Brotherhood of Carpenters, and yes, it is a US success story, but it's a really great case study where union members have been trained in the productive conflict, so that the conflict that happens on the construction sites is more productive rather than destructive. And I think you'll find that really worth seeing. And you can actually also download that video from our website as a case study to show to other people as well. Okay, and then next steps. And Wiley have created a number of several now 2-hour virtual workshops based around their profiles. And so there's also a 2-hour productive conflict virtual workshop for debriefing people on their productive conflict profile. So an actual learning experience to learn to apply the productive conflict profile and the model behind it in the workplace. And so we'll talk about that at the end, and that's available for you to use with your teammates or clients as well. And so the idea of the webinar is to give you an overview of what the learning experience is, and then if you want to actually experience it, we'll have a couple of dates for you where you can sign up to come to the workshop. Okay, so first of all, what's the first word that comes to mind when you think about conflict? And I'd like you to just click on the chat box at the bottom, the ribbon on the bottom of your screen or the dashboard, and type in what's the first thing that comes to mind for you. Okay, so we're getting, it's exhausting, disagreement, stress, different perceptions, differences of opinion, disharmony, upset, unpleasant, productive, someone came up with, great. Passion, energy, strong opinions, wasted resources, difficult. Yeah, it's argumentative, debate, yeah. It's time consuming, creates anxiety. Yeah, okay, let's see what Wiley came up with in a survey of thousands of people to say, what does conflict mean to you? And here are similar words to what, in fact, we had some of those words come up, but drama was the big one. And so 12,000 people responded to the survey in late 2019, and 90% of their responses were negative. Okay, which means it's obvious there's 10% of people who see some positive. And the whole idea of the productive conflict profile, I think there's another slide that actually says 90% of them were negative. The whole idea of the profile and the learning experience is so that we, when these things come up, when these destructive responses come up, we know what to do about it, and we can translate them into a more productive experience. Okay, so also out of the research, 70% of managers said that conflict negatively impacts the efficiency in their departments. Managers, directors, and executives spend an average of 3.2 hours a week dealing with interpersonal conflict. 69% said that their job satisfaction would improve if their co-workers handled conflict more effectively, and 40% have left a job because of unhealthy conflict. And so it's there, it doesn't go away, but we certainly can change the experience of it. So we need to move from this uncomfortable reaction in the workplace to learning how to thrive by effectively navigating conflict. Okay, and as we start moving towards coming back to work together, it's going to be interesting to just see how people adapt to coming back from working remotely to actually interacting with people face to face again. Okay, all right, so conflict resolution is the process of resolving a dispute without confrontation. And we've had conflict resolution training around for decades. It's reactively addressing conflict after the fact. It often involves negotiation or mediation or arbitration after a conflict has occurred. And the aim is to eliminate conflict with a step-by-step process once it's happened. All right. Productive conflict is an open exchange of different ideas and opinions. It's productively engaging in conflict in the moment. In productive conflict, all parties feel equally heard, they feel respected and unafraid to voice dissenting opinions. I'm not sure if it's totally unafraid, because I know we're getting better and better at having productive conflict at Integro. because we've been working with this profile now for about 18 months, and it still creates anxiety. For me, I'm an SI style, and I do have an extra priority on action, but I'm definitely in the S area, and conflict feels uncomfortable. But obviously, I have to learn to do that. I have to push myself through that anxiety, and striving to reach a mutually comfortable solution. All right. So that's the productive part of it. Okay. All right. So the recipe for productive conflict is, first of all, the individual understanding themselves and others in conflict, particularly. And so that's the starting point in the profile, is how do you tend to react in conflict, and how does your DISC style influence that? All right. Secondly, it's to recognize the destructive thoughts and habitual responses. So the profile and the model in the profile is based on cognitive behavioral theory, right? And so it's helping people to be more cognizant, more aware of the automatic thoughts that come up that trigger their habitual destructive responses. And once we're aware of those, we can do something about it. And so that's the whole idea of this profile and the learning experience, is then to catch and reframe those automatic thoughts before the conflict actually occurs, when the reaction occurs, and to choose a more productive response, and then maintain commitment to finding mutually comfortable solutions, right? So it's also about, and those of you that deal with Integro a lot would know that the large majority of people at Integro have a primary S style, if not a secondary S. And so the S style is the style that has the greatest difficulty in being direct and engaging in productive conflict. And so it starts with us all agreeing that it's okay to speak up and to disagree and to engage in productive conflict, that no one's going to be judged for it. Okay, so we have a facilitator kit and a profile. Okay, and that profile, you can see there is the sample report of Ruby Prescott. We're actually going to meet Ruby. There's a photograph of Ruby anyway in a moment. And like with all the other facilitator kits, it's a program in a box with a USB stick, and there's some other resources in there as well that we can talk about a little bit later. All right. So the idea is that you can actually take people through a very powerful 4-hour learning experience if you can get them face to face. There's a 2-hour version of that if we're still working virtually with people. From the way things are at the moment, we're doing mostly virtual, but hopefully that'll come back soon. Okay, so we use a transformational learning model. This is the same for pretty much all of the everything DISC assessments. There's the actual assessment itself. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual questions in a moment. There's some additional product-specific questions in addition to the everything DISC adaptive testing assessment. Then people get the profile, and then there's the facilitation, and then there's the follow-up tools to keep it alive and keep people using it in the workplace. Okay, so there's 2 sets of questions. The core questions are to determine where your dot falls. Now, if you've done another DISC assessment, you can actually use existing data. That is, you can use the responses from a workplace profile or a management profile and basically copy them into the productive conflict profile, but there will be a link sent out with additional questions. So the base questions look like this. All right, and I think most of you would be fairly familiar with those, using a 5-point Likert scale. And then there's the conflict-specific questions, which are the conflict priorities. Just like all of the other DISC profiles, there are priorities around the outside of the DISC map, And so rather than just assuming that everybody who's an S responds to conflict in exactly the same way, we actually ask, how do you actually behave in conflict situations? And you can have an extra priority indicating that you've learnt to adapt your natural style to use a different method of responding to conflict. And that will come out in your profile. All right. So going back to the transformational learning model, the profile and the facilitation is what I'm going to spend a bit of time on now, and look at the learning experience itself. The first step is to understand your natural tendency in conflict, and also then recognize the destructive conflict behaviors that you tend to use, and then how do I adapt and use productive responses rather than destructive ones by changing my automatic thoughts. Okay, so let's dive into yourself. And so part one of the profile and of the facilitation learning experience is to understand conflict using everything DISC. Okay, explore your own DISC style and to learn about other DISC styles in conflict. Now, the profile itself will not mention that this is a needs-driven behavioral model, and anyone who's been to any of our training knows how much emphasis we place on that, and how valuable it is for people to understand that the reason they're using their the behavioral style that they are, or the behaviors that they are, is because of the psychological needs that drive that behavior. And that behavior then satisfies the need. And so the same thing applies here in the productive conflict profile. And when I'm facilitating this with a group, I would always include the DISC theory model and the whole person concept up front as a reminder of that. All right, so I can better understand my conflict reactions. Okay, and then I'm also going to learn about the DISC styles of other people and how that comes out in conflict. So here's Ruby. I'm sure you've all had the experience of speaking with someone on the phone or reading about someone and a description of them, and you get an image of what they look like. And I did not get an image of anyone looking like this Ruby here when I first saw the profile. And Ruby is a D style. And so as it says here, in conflict situations, she can be insensitive, create win-lose situations, and become dismissive of others when something goes wrong. So let's have a look at her profile. All right, and if we go to page 2, we'll see, like everything DISC profiles, there's a bit of a narrative introduction, and there's a description here which defines conflict. In a sense, conflict comes down to a difference of opinions involving strong emotions. And then there's a personalized report, okay? That's talking to Ruby. Okay, so we've got a conflict definition, we've got cornerstone principles, as with all of the other everything DISC profiles, and that's an important foundation. That one of the key things here is point number 3, your response to conflict situations is in your own control. You cannot control how others respond to conflict. Now, I've actually had people on programs in the past who didn't believe they did have control of their own emotions, and because I say I can't help it, I always yell and scream at people when I get angry. All right, and so it's an important stepping stone in this process here for people to recognize that they actually do have control. They can learn how to control those reactions, and that's precisely what the profile helps them do. And of course, the learning experience learners to practice that, okay, to move towards more productive conflict. Okay, down at the bottom of page 2, you'll see the everything DISC descriptions, the 4 styles, the 4 primary styles. But in addition to the regular behaviors there, we've also got an addition here of how each of them tends to behave in conflict. All right, and that's quite insightful for people. And I know when I first saw this sample report on Ruby, there was quite a few things in the because she's a D style, the opposite of me, that I was quite surprised at. And all of a sudden it makes sense. You know, in conflict, Ruby focuses on logic and victory. Okay, that's so far away from where I am, that it's really helpful for me to understand that and not to take it personally if that's what's going on. Okay. All right. So understanding the DISC model, and then we go to the narrative report, and here you can see that Ruby has 3 priorities. Let me take that thing out of the road first. Of control, assertion, and justification are the 3 primary priorities for someone in the D style when they're in conflict. Now, Ruby also has an extra priority on objectivity, which is something that's more typical of a C style person. Okay, so we can see what her D style is. We can see the DISC map. I've already covered the priorities. And we can see that Ruby has a narrative report, and the narrative report's based around those 4 priorities in her case. Okay, personalized to her, and like we would do with any other profile, and we're facilitating this, we would ask Ruby to personalize it, tick the things you agree with, put a cross on things you don't agree with, put a question mark on anything you're not sure of. So individualizing it. Okay, and then similar to the workplace profile where we have motivators and stressors, in this profile we have what's important to you during conflict. And this is one that really interested me because like I said, I'm as far away as you can get from D, and halfway down the bullet points there, the list is winning arguments. All right, that's something that's really important to the D style. Okay, which sort of makes sense now because they do tend to want to win arguments, and they do tend to keep going when we're in a conflict situation. All right, it's difficult for them to let go of that. So being understanding of other styles is also very valuable. Okay, and then secondly on this page, what drains your energy in conflict? All right, and so and again we would personalize this with the individuals in the session, and they'd be cross question marking the bullet points, etc. Okay, and obviously having some breakout discussions with other people and talking about the things that are most accurate for them and so on, as you would be familiar with, we do in all our facilitations. Okay, so page 5 then looks at an overview of DISC in conflict. Okay, and we're looking at the productive tendencies on the inner circle inside the colored shaded areas, and then on the outside we've got the destructive tendencies for each of the 4 styles. All right, those of you familiar with the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team will sort of recognize this. We have a conflict map in the team version of 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, and there we look at the productive tendencies and the healthy conflict tendencies and the unproductive or unhealthy tendencies, and here we're talking more about destructive tendencies. Okay, so we're getting a good understanding now of the differences between the different styles and how they react, but now we take that to a more personal level, and you'll see here that in Ruby's profile she has 4 pages, one for each of the 4 styles, and how what drives each of those styles in conflict and how they compare to you, and how can you have more productive conflict with these styles. Okay, so let's have a look at a colleague of Ruby's, Dave, and he's a C style, right? So he keeps emotions out of discussions, prefers logical debate, and prides himself on his critical thinking skills. All right, and so when Ruby dives into the page about the C style to look at how she can have more productive conflict with Dave, she's going to see, first of all, an explanation of how this person tends to behave in conflict. And you'll see that the bold words in those paragraphs are the 3 priorities for the C style: objective, justify, and stability. Okay, that's what drives the C style in conflict. Now, to better understand Dave, she can now look at how he behaves compared to you. All right. Now you'll see that it says similarly analytical and logic focused. Um, and that's because of her additional priority and objectivity, that she has some things in common with Dave. Okay. And then at the bottom of the page, how can you have more productive conflict with Dave? And there's some specific tips there for her to relate better to him. Okay, so the first section about understanding yourself and others in conflict is summarized here on page 10, and this is part 1 in the profile and in the facilitation. And at the bottom of the page here, there's some reflection time, and this is a key activity. Think of a conflict situation you were in that you wish you would have handled better. Briefly describe it below, and what impact do you think your disc style had on the situation? All right, so that becomes this individual's own personal case study that they're going to take with them through the rest of the workshop. Okay, and obviously it's important for people to then apply it to their own real life situation. Okay, so we're moving into part 2. And in Ruby's case, there was an incident with Dave, right? Ruby's team had a project deadline and she had a plan. When she presented the plan, Dave was concerned with some of the logistics and details around her plan. Ruby didn't think the team had time to consider all this and pushed back on his questions. Dave wanted to ensure the team got things right before moving forward, but Ruby dismissed his opinions and the two became argumentative and Ruby walked out. Okay, so that was the incident. All right. So now Ruby's looking at her profile and says, now that I know how I react in conflict, how can I recognize my destructive conflict behaviors and what triggers them? Okay, which is step 2 in the learning experience. Okay, so first of all, Ruby needs to understand the automatic thoughts that caused her to react the way she did and walk out of the meeting. All right, and she needs to understand how those automatic thoughts trigger those destructive behaviors, and actually learn to recognize those thoughts before she actually walks out of the meeting, and maybe change her response in that situation. So let's look at a couple of examples here, and we're going to use the C style. So we're going to take a situation for Dave. All right, so Dave is in this conflict situation with Ruby, and he's thinking, his automatic thought is, if this situation gets heated, it will be awful. All right, so that's the thought. Okay, that's going to trigger feelings of anxiety, and he's going to also want to withdraw. Okay, another example for someone with a C style, in this case Dave again, another automatic thought could be, I can wear this person down with superior logic. And so the feeling that comes from that thought would be to be defiant and then to overpower with logic. All right. Let's have a look at a different example. Let's jump across diagonally from the C style to the I style. And here's Ron. Ron does his best to keep things friendly and upbeat. He wants to be well liked. He's willing to share what's on his mind, right? And he gets into a conflict situation, and the automatic thought is, you don't care about me. The feeling that will come up there is to feel undervalued, and he might throw a bit of a tantrum, okay? Which I-style people have been known to do from time to time, okay? And then another potential automatic thought for the I-style would be, they're making me out to be the bad guy. And the feeling there would be to feel insecure, and then may turn around and start gossiping about that person. Okay. All right. So let's go to page 11 in the profile, and here we're looking at a 3-step process. There's the conflict, there's the automatic thought, and then there's the destructive response, the reaction. And you can see at the bottom of that page. Actually, before we go through those, I'm going to get Candace to put up a poll, and I'm going to ask you, we've chosen 10 of those destructive responses. Which of those common destructive responses have you used? You can choose more than one. I'd just like to see what kind of things you do when you're in conflict situations. Okay, arguing's getting a few runs. Defensiveness, yeah, withdrawing. Yeah, wow, 11 people, 12 people withdrawing. Passive aggression is a popular one. Defensiveness, caving in, arguing, becoming dramatic. Yeah, okay. All right, well, thanks for that. We've got over 30 responses, and if we have a look at that, we'll see defensiveness, and defensiveness can take a lot of different forms, can't it? And withdrawing is very popular. And as you can imagine, this ties in with DISC very much, and we would expect to see more withdrawing down in the SC style areas, because that's something that I naturally tend to do as well. Okay, thanks for that. And all right, so when we look at page 11 in the profile, you can see that there's actually 18 destructive responses based on the research that was done in developing this profile, the most commonly used destructive responses. And everything from aggressiveness in terms of arguing and belittling to caving in and withdrawing, right? At opposite ends of the spectrum. And so the program asks you to put a check mark, or a tick as we would call it, in the circle next to the 3 behaviors that others do that bother you the most when you're in conflict. That is, the 3 that you would have most difficulty dealing with. And then put a star next to the 3 behaviors that you do most often in conflict, okay? And then we're going to work with those through the workshop to identify what the automatic thoughts are, okay? So on pages 12 to 18, there's 7 pages of interpretation around each of those 18 destructive responses, all right? And let's just zoom in on one of those, okay? Arguing, which is the first one. And this profile says, like others with the D style, right? You may have so much confidence in your vision that it's frustrating when others can't or won't see what's obvious to you. That's the interpretation for Ruby, because she's a D style. So if you're an S style, the interpretation will be very different, right? Because the S style will likely behave very differently when they're in an argument, when things get a bit tense, okay? Now, down the bottom, you'll see the automatic thoughts. There's no way I'm backing down, or I don't get it, or I don't get you. I'm obviously right. Now, those automatic thoughts will trigger the arguing, all right? And so each person would be looking at the 3 that they use most frequently of the 18 destructive responses, and what the automatic thoughts are that are triggering that. Okay, so then after we've been through and studied that a little bit and maybe discussed it in small breakout groups, we'll go to page 19, which is my favorite page. And there's 2 things I want to draw your attention to here. And the first one is, it says your D style and automatic thoughts. All right, and so the top half of the page, you've got a whole list of potential automatic thoughts that Ruby is likely to have because she's a D style. All right, now, as you can imagine, my automatic thoughts that appear on this page in my profile are completely different to Ruby's. All right, and it's scary. It's so accurate. When I was reading for the first time, I thought, how did they know that about me? Right? It's just because these are automatic thoughts that are automatic because they're a reaction to the needs that I have, and my needs not getting met because of this conflict situation. All right, and so it's very accurate stuff, and so I'm emphasizing the needs part of it, because the better we understand, excuse me, the needs that drive our behavior, the more sense this makes to me. And that's why I tend to do this. Now, you'll see the bottom part of the page here, we have the reflection piece again. And we're thinking back to the conflict situation described on page 10, where you didn't handle it as well as you would like. What were the automatic thoughts, and how did the automatic thoughts influence that response? Okay, so we're now getting a better understanding of that. Okay, so now let's go back to Ruby, and we're going on to stage 3 in the report and in the facilitation. Now I understand my automatic thoughts and how they influence my behavior. How can I change my response? Okay, so and choose a more productive response. So we're going to practice catching and reframing automatic responses, and we're going to continue evaluating and improving conflict experiences. Okay, so we get to page 20 in the profile. All right. We've got the conflict, we've got the automatic thought, and instead of going straight to a destructive reaction, we're going to first step back and then reframe, right? And then choose a productive response, okay? So also on page 20, you'll see it talks about anger and your D style, anxiety and your D style. That's personalized information for Ruby. Obviously, mine would say anger and your SI style, anxiety and your SI style, because anger and anxiety are two of the most common emotions that come up for people in a negative conflict situation. Okay. All right. So, so now that we're recognizing what the unhealthy automatic thought is, let's catch and reframe that automatic thought and choose a more productive response. So here's an example. Let's come back to Ruby. All right. Ruby's automatic thought, which got her into arguing, was you have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. So her feelings would be to be defiant and to become argumentative, which she did. And then she left the room. Okay. So we've got to cut off that automatic thought, interrupt it, and reframe that and say, well, hang on a second. He may have a different perspective. I need to listen to him. Okay. And when she does that, the feeling will be more open-minded and the behavior will be to listen. All right. So, so then as part of the program, people get a chance to practice reframing automatic thoughts. And in the top part of this little blow up piece, you'll see that it actually gives 3 questions that can help us to reframe. Is this thought actually valid or true? Am I overreacting or exaggerating the problem? Is there another way I could look at this situation? I would recommend that everyone have a copy of those 3 questions in their workstation, maybe on a mirror at home somewhere, because we all have these automatic thoughts. And if there's something there that can remind us to say, well, hang on a second, is that true? Or am I overreacting, right? And that's going to lead me into being able to reframe the automatic thought, as see for Ruby's example there, okay? And then at the bottom of the page, there's room to practice coming up with reframed thoughts for the automatic thoughts that we identified from the exercise we started on page 10. Okay, and then on page 22 in the profile, you'll see there's a range of productive responses here, and people are encouraged to indicate, put a tick or a cross on the continuum where they think they sit in terms of apologizing. Is that easy for me or is that difficult? Determining the root of the problem, stepping back to reflect, and identifying things that I need to put more energy into. All right, and so and then at the bottom, more reflection for Ruby. This is the reframed thought, and so then what am I going to do differently now that I've reframed that thought? Okay, so that's the actual process of the learning experience, and the follow-up tools. There's the last page in the profile is an action planning worksheet. You'll see there's room for 2 exercises. First of all, briefly describe the conflict situation. What were your automatic thoughts? What was your response? And how did you reframe your thoughts Could you have done better? Okay, that's also available as a PDF file to give to participants so that they can reproduce it as many times as they want and continue to practice working on that and logging their conflict situations. Okay, there's also in the facilitator kit, there's one of these reference guides. It's a little flip book. And it has a page for each of the 18 destructive responses and the automatic thoughts that drive them. So it's just something that you can keep on your desk as a reminder to keep practicing using this model. Okay. One other thing that you can do as a reinforcement to keep DISC alive is the productive conflict profile can be uploaded into your myeverythingdisc.com account. Okay, so that you can use the continua there to practice building better relationships with your co-workers, all right, by generating comparison reports, etc. Okay. All right, so I've got a few minutes left. I just want to take you into this little video. As I said, it's available from our website. To download and use if you like, but it's also available as a PDF file, a narrative description of this case study. Okay, so this is the United Brotherhood of Carpenters, okay, and they'll tell a story about how they came to do this, but I'd just like to share it with you. I just need to remember that I need to share my computer sound before I click go on this thing. Okay, we're all set.
UBC exists for the express purpose of improving the lives of carpenters and their families so that we can stand together for wages and benefits and work conditions. When the time crunch comes and the boss is saying, we got to get this done, we got to get this done, temperatures go up.
When you have compressed schedules, tight profit margins, that many people doing different things on a project, conflict is an everyday part of our life. We strive for a constructive culture in everything we do. Everything DISC is a tool that we use to ensure that that constructive culture takes place every day.
Utilizing Everything DISC products within our programs brings validity to what we're doing. It really just emphasizes the things we're trying to accomplish. And for someone to self-assess and get results that were not told by someone else, but that they brought to the table, I think that the impact on them has a lot of value.
It just made me more conscientious of how I communicate with others and how I'm coming off to others as I try to communicate to them.
Interesting how you took all these questions and the next thing you know, you have this profile on yourself. If you really looked at it and go, wow, I can improve in this part, or I am strong in this part where you didn't think you were.
2 or 3 minutes into the report, you can see the faces change. They're punching each other saying, look at this is so me. It's not that they're just evaluating themselves, that they're eager to get other people to give them insight.
Offering and providing soft skills to our members, to our staff, gives them additional tools outside of the hands-on training. And it really just helped boost them as people, but also just as members of this organization, that they're just better all-around people.
It causes you to look at yourself at face value and to realize that you can change in certain areas that's going to help you become a better person, in which that's what it actually did for me. How I approach different things with my son, with my wife. I mean, it really impacted me.
It's a great story, isn't it? I really like that last guy, how it helped him at home as well. So, so the Everything DISC productive conflict learning experience helps organizations harness the power of conflict, right? We don't want conflict to go away. I read fairly recently that the huge multinational company Intel, and I'm sure everybody's had an Intel processor in their computer at one stage, if not now, have a policy for that everybody's indoctrinated with when they go to meetings, and that is to disagree and commit. In other words, everybody is encouraged to disagree as much as they want to, during meetings, but when they leave the meeting, they're expected to commit to the decisions that are being made. And that's something that productive conflict can really help to create as part of a culture. So you get the personalized insights from your DISC profile and how your DISC profile influences your automatic thoughts, and therefore your reactions to conflict. And then it goes on using cognitive behavioral theory to help people learn to reframe those automatic thoughts, and uses a scientifically validated model for behavior change. Okay, so result is improved relationships. And improved decision making, because we're getting all of the ideas out on the table. People aren't afraid to speak up, and that's obviously what we need. So I think that we're putting this out there for you to look at now as another tool that can help your people when they're coming back together. What is it going to look like in your organization when people come back together? Is there going to be any tension or stress from people adapting back into the work environment? And if so, is productive conflict something that can really help people to assimilate back into working as a team more quickly? Okay, so next steps. If you or someone you know would like to experience the Everything DISC Productive profile and learn to facilitate a 2-hour virtual workshop, we will be facilitating two 2-hour virtual productive conflict workshops in June and then July. Okay, these will be online on Zoom. You will be taking the profile, or the participant will be taking the profile and getting their results and processing that. There'll be breakout room activities where you'll be able to apply that. For example, the case study, page 10, think of an example where you didn't handle conflict the way you would like, and actually work with that through the 2-hour session to come up with an action plan. Okay, and so this is one of a series. If you're interested in the other workshops, we've got a number of 2-hour workshops going on. The schedule is on our website under online training, and as it does say there, there's a $250 fee, which includes the profile for attending that 2-hour workshop. Okay, I'm going to throw it open to questions. So you could just type them into the chat box. Well, so far we've got a comment. I love the needs-based model. One of the 2-hour workshops that we have available also is based around the Agile EQ profile. And the Agile EQ profile is the first Everything DISC profile that actually spells out what your needs are that result in you using the mindsets that you use. Yes, Ricky asked a question. Yes, they're separate workshops. It's just the same thing being done twice. You only need to attend one. If people have already done a DISC profile, they don't need to do the DISC questions again, but they would need to complete the questions specific to the conflict profile, productive conflict profile, to get a productive conflict profile. Yes. Yeah, the comment here, the level of self-awareness seems to be, oops, let me just, seems to be an important criteria for truthfully responding to the scales in the conflict profile. Yeah, look, I think the experience I've got with this profile is that people actually do answer it pretty honestly in terms of how they behave in conflict situations. And we're talking about the conflict priority questions here. There's about 20 of them. All right, so there's 20 additional questions over and above the everything disc questions in this profile, which is quite similar to the Agile EQ profile. Question here about how can we find out more about the Agile EQ profile? Go to our website, integro.com.au, go to everything disc, and you'll see a link there to all profiles, and you'll find a section on the Agile EQ profile where you'll be able to download it. And also, obviously, if you want more information, we've had a webinar. I did a webinar recently on the Agile EQ profile. We have a recording of that. We can send you a link if you would just want to contact support@integro.com.au. We can send you the recording of the Agile EQ webinar. We're also running 2-hour workshops on the Agile EQ profile where you can actually take the profile and participate in the 2-hour workshop. We've done a couple already, and I think we've still got at least one to go. So again, that will be on our website in online courses. And Patricia, I don't know if you could just contact support@integro.com.au, and we might be able to help you find your profile. Okay. The conflict profile uses 20 EPIC credits. All right, so that's roughly, what would that be? $130 to do an extra conflict profile. This, yeah, comment here that I see this as an incredible tool to accompany mediation and conflict coaching. It's a great coaching tool as well. Just if you're coaching somebody, this would be a great resource to have to help them in that coaching space. Okay. All right, I think that's all the questions. I would strongly recommend that you purchase the productive conflict kit if you're going to facilitate the productive conflict profile. There's a ton of videos in there and examples of the automatic thoughts process and how that descends into conflict, so people can actually see how the different styles react differently, and it gives them more of a visual as to why they do what they do. And no, you do not need to be accredited to use this profile. Leanne, if you just contact us through support@integro.com.au, and we'll have your account manager follow up with you to talk more about the productive conflict learning experience in the kit and everything. There you go. Candy's all over it. Candy's going to get your account manager to follow up with you, Leanne. Okay. Okay. And so thanks very much for joining us today. I can see that it's been helpful in helping you see how all this fits together. And there's going to be more coming from Wiley later this year about the integration of the workplace profile, the productive conflict profile, and the Agile EQ profile as an integrated whole for creating a really healthy culture in an organization. So we're very much focused on everything DISC as a culture catalyst, and that's the direction Wiley are going in. So thanks again for coming along, and if you have any questions, please contact us through support@integro.com.au, or 1-800-222-902 is our toll-free phone number. Okay. Talk to you again soon.